But, you go through and you go some of the higher RAS scores. So these are the relative athletic scores.
Not Riz.
No, not Riz. That's a completely different thing. But James Pierce Jr., for instance, from Tennessee, edge rusher, had a high RAS score. Jihad Campbell, the linebacker from Alabama, had a high RAS score. Sorry, Kang. Jay Higgins did not, the linebacker from Iowa.
I knew he wouldn't. He's not a RAS guy.
No.
He's a football player, Doug.
Well, and that matters. And I know that's one of those things that people laugh at, but if it somehow is oozing from your DNA, the Lions like that.
How was Armand Membu's RAS score?
Armand Membu?
Who's the offensive tackle from Missouri who ran really well.
I'll have to go find the offensive tackles. Other guys that did well. Terrence Ferguson, the tight end out of Oregon, had an exceptionally high RAS score. Let's see here. Top offensive lineman. Ariante Ursare did pretty well. The tackle from Minnesota. Membo did well. Membo had a good RAS score. So these are some of the stuff that's measurable.
Well, this was an incredibly fast combine for all positions. I'm just looking at offensive linemen, and there look to be 25 guys that ran 4.92 or better.
Yeah.
Not that 40-yard dash time matters too much for an offensive lineman. It just goes to speak on the athleticism of some of these players. At all positions. But I came away from the combine thinking that there is an awful lot of depth on offensive line, defensive back, and wide receiver. I think there's a ton of depth. So when I'm thinking about how do you go about the draft? What do you do? You can treat it a couple ways. You can treat it like, okay, I'm going to go and try to maximize the depth in this draft. Can you trade out of 28 and trade back a little bit and maybe get an extra pick in the top 3 rounds to do that? So you maximize it? Or, we've got all this talk and all this distraction about Myles Garrett and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you talk about giving up draft capital to go get him, and how much would it take to move to entice Cleveland? Is there a player in this year's draft that you would look at and say, you know what? That guy I think is can't miss. I want to get him. And all I have to do is maybe give up my first-round pick this year and let's say a second-round pick next year to move up and get this guy. Is that type of player available? Because that way you're not having to sign him to some monster contract because he'd be a rookie. He'd be a first-round pick. You'd have him for 5 years. Is there that player that dazzles you so much that you think that you can move up and just really cost you a second-round pick to move up 10 spots or whatever it is?
You're talking about an impact player.
Yeah. Somebody you think might be impact, because it looks like there's some depth in there, some high-end players here.
Okay, so you're talking about moving up, not moving back.
I'm talking about if you wanted to do both. If you want depth, you could go back. But if there's a guy that you love, why not move up?
Okay, so you're talking about two
totally different scenarios.
All right, gotcha. I'm like,
Totally
how are you going to move up
scenarios.
and move back?
You can't, no. But I'm saying you can pick either way.
I mean, I tend to be a go after the depth. I would probably prefer to move back and hoard, even though they aren't as upper crust. Look, there's 2 guys that have been mocked to Detroit, but like Terrion Arnold, for instance. So you're talking about a Terrion Arnold kind of move, where you move up 6, 7 spots,
yeah.
4 or 5 spots, whatever they did.
Willing to move up higher, but yeah.
Yeah.
And what did it cost him to move up that? Was it a third-round pick or something?
Look, yeah. I remember exactly what they did to move up. Trade up for quick Google search, sorry. It was apparently a third-round pick, yeah. Lions card number 24 from Dallas. They moved from 29 to 24 and gave up the pick at 73. And a 7th. They got a 7th rounder back. So they ended up with the same number of draft picks. Okay. There are 2 players in this draft that we have seen mocked to Detroit that I like them both very much. And if they were getting close to the Lions pick and they could move up to secure one of these 2, I would not have an issue with them moving up for them, even though I'm preferring to fall back. But since you brought up the move up scenario, and before anybody says, wait, they've been mocked to Detroit, I'm not sure they're going to be there on the board when Detroit picks, but the two players are two players we have great familiarity with, and they both play the same position. Derek Harmon at Oregon, the defensive tackle, and Kenneth Grant at Michigan, the defensive tackle. Would you be mad if they moved up 4 or 5 spots and got one of those guys?
See, defense, I think there's so much depth. I want to get the elite guy. If you think he's elite, then go do it. You know,
well, who would you move up for? Obviously, you brought it up for a reason. So who would you?
Well,
move up for?
I wondered, did Jihad Campbell? Did
the
he
linebacker?
Yeah, from Alabama, pass rusher guy who is quicker than Will Anderson, is big, and plays the position pretty well. Guy who didn't have an injury issue a couple of years ago, so didn't really play, and then this year he was really coming on. And has this guy done enough where I might be the top half of the draft? Is that a guy that you could go after?
Jihad Campbell had a good RAS score, and he formally met with the Lions. And if he formally met with the Lions, that tells you that he was enough on their radar. Now the question is, did he kill it? Did he say the right things? And again, we don't know that. Jack Campbell got rave reviews a couple of years ago for his RAS score of 998. I think Jihad Campbell had a 995, which, he had a 9.95 RAS score, which is pretty highly regarded. And so, that is, he's close to that.
6'3", 235, ran a 4.52, broad jump of 10 foot 7 inches, which is pretty good when you look at the explosiveness. The 10-yard split, which everybody's looking at, was pretty high at 1.53. And he was a terror by the end of the season.
248-539-9797. Who were your favorites at the Combine?